Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Cady Allen on the show. Good morning to you, Cady.
Morning, Julian. Can you hear
Good
me
to.
okay?
I can hear you fine. Good to see you. You are a managing consultant at PA Consulting, and today we're going to be exploring empathetic leadership. Before we go there, Cady, what do you love about what you do?
Okay, so probably a good idea to start with what I do. So I bring together, I have an academic background in commercial law and sociology, and that's been the golden thread throughout my career. So bringing together commercial, legal, and people-centered change skills to unlock ambition in complex programs, change and transformation programs. What I love doing, what really sort of gets me out of bed in the morning, is bringing together quite diverse disciplines, so different capabilities in teams to collaborate and drive value outcomes. Usually working hand in glove with client teams, so tend to work in integrated teams. My personal focus in that is the human element of change, so hearts and minds, corralling people around a shared vision and goal for the future, and then supporting to safely and positively take people through the change that their organisation is going through, and that the nature of the change is sort of less relevant in that context. It could be digital, it could be a structural, it could be a new strategic direction for the organisation. The bit that gets me really excited is always the human impact, the human element of that.
I love that you like the human element, and it's often a aspect that's often forgotten in organisations that we are humans, and we are people full of emotion, hearts, minds, and souls, and everything else. And it ties really nicely talking about empathetic leadership, because that's certainly the human element of it. I saw a blog from, I can't remember where now, but there was a study done with nearly 900 workers conducted by Catalyst, and they found that workplace empathy led to increases in inclusivity, innovation, retention, engagement, and work-life balance. The study also found that when employees perceive leaders as empathetic, employees were far more likely to report positive mental health status. So some really good positive stuff about empathetic leadership. So from your perspective, Cady, what is empathetic leadership, and why is it important in today's world?
Hmm. It's I think I know the study that you've been that you've read there, and I'm seeing a real uptick in articles and opinion pieces on this of recent, which is really good to see. It feels like there's some momentum behind this. Um, so for me, empathetic leadership is recognizing that across a diverse range of people that make up an organization or a team, um, there will be different needs, different pressures, different wants and desires, and different goals. And for me, it's about understanding what they are from the experience and the viewpoint of the individual, and tailoring your approach so that you can support that individual to realize their potential given their individual circumstances. Um, why is that important? Um, you've listed some of the benefits and outcomes that are starting to be recognised from approaching staff engagement and employee value proposition and benefits in that way. I think for me as a leader, why it's important is I have to listen and understand the experiences of my team so that I know how to support them. I'm an accredited coach, so I've always had a coaching leadership approach. Um, I think if you don't, then you will find yourself with blind spots. You will find yourself making assumptions about what your team and what your workforce need and want, and what pressures are on them, and quite quickly could find yourself coming across as out of touch. And I think for me, that's probably the kind of key thing that's at stake. Nobody really wants to. I don't think anyone in a leadership position wants to be out of touch or risk having a disengaged workforce. The consequences of that are quite significant, and namely retention and attrition are two big things that I think that could lead to.
Yeah, so some real sort of value adds of why it's obviously positive to be empathetic in your leadership. When did you realise for yourself that that's how you lead, and that's how you felt was a positive way of engaging with others and make you more, I suppose, an advocate for empathetic leadership?
So I draw. I take feedback really seriously. I encourage 360 feedback in all the teams that I work with, not just internally, but integrated team with clients, collaborators, suppliers as well. And it was a theme that started to arise out of feedback that I was receiving on my performance, particularly from teams that I was leading and managing, so the program teams. So that made me more self-aware of it. And then I wanted to unpack that a little bit more in terms of, okay, so what's the positive impact that has had, and what would people like to sort of see more of? Then we always do what's called client value reviews. So most organisations do them midway point or at the end of a program. We interview our clients to understand what their experience has been like working with us and are they happy. And then that theme came through as well, that we had an empathetic approach to change and to working with them. So then I was recognizing that the benefits were not just with the immediate team around me that I was managing, but the broader benefits in a change and transformation context were becoming quite evident to the people that were impacted by the programs that I was managing and leading. And then it just sort of all clicked in place, really. I'm in absolute awe of the technical experts that are around me that do operating model, enterprise architecture. I mean, we have the most amazing and innovative capabilities. But I think we can agree that most people who are impacted by change, that may not be what they recognize through a change program. That may not be what they talk about to their friends or family. Usually it's, how did they feel? How did they feel throughout it? Did they feel consulted? Did they feel engaged? Did they feel listened to? Was the experience a positive one? And we do that in our day-to-day lives. Brands that we love, what was the customer service experience? We tend to talk, we're humans, we tend to talk in feelings and emotions. So it became it became a real kind of success factor to me in terms of really proactively focusing on how do we want people to feel through this journey, and how do we ensure that that we're creating the right safe spaces and level of trust, so that people have a positive experience, even if it's not a change, that they don't have to be an advocate of it. You can still have a positive experience through something that you're not necessarily an advocate of. So it very quickly became a quite a significant focus in how I approach everything that I do at work.
And you mentioned there you talked a lot about feelings and how that's really important to how people feel, and along the journey of change, on the journey of anything, their feelings, and feelings can be a little bit. It's full of emotions. It's can get a little bit sort of, I don't know, is it a bit woolly? Is it a bit? It's not very business-like. Is it a little bit, a bit soft? And I think sometimes there's a perception or a misconception that being empathetic is you're soft and you can't make decisive sort of decisions. You can't be accountable. You don't get results. What would you say to that sort of misconception?
I mean, I think it is a misconception. I think some of the benefits and outcomes that that you referenced from the study that you referenced earlier speak quite strongly to the contrary of that. I don't think I'm a big fan of hard and soft skills. Still skills, strengths, traits. Attributes that you want from your workforce and you want to cultivate and build, and so I'm not really a fan of the hard and soft. As I say, I think the soft always comes, as you've rightly called out, it's perceived as less important or a nice to have. I think recent events that we are still going through. So we've come through, or coming out the tail end, hopefully, of a pandemic. We're in a cost of living crisis. What perhaps were perceived as the softer skills that were nice to haves, actually for employees are critical skills, critical benefits from being from their employer. And I think it links back to you've got your contract with your employer, and then you've got what you can call the emotional contract with your employer. And often the emotional contract, the culture, and how you're treated, and how you feel when you leave work is often or increasingly becoming just as, if not more important than the written down contracts of the job you do, the amount you're paid and your salary, etc. I think the the creating the safe space for people to talk about how they're feeling. You don't have to do that in a way of talking about the emotions themselves. There's lots of ways that you can do that, that because talking about emotions can often exacerbate those. So we have, for example, we have a well-being call on our program, and we have various different ways of supporting the team to speak openly and safely about how they might be feeling. One of those ways is that we use weather as an analogy. So today I'm feeling sunny and bright, and because X, Y, and Z positive has happened in my life. Somebody else in the team's saying, actually, I feel I've woken up and there's a bit of a mist around me. I know I've got the tools and the skills to get to the other side of it, but I can't quite see that right now because I'm back to back in meetings, and I've got quite a lot on and quite a lot to navigate through in terms of challenges. It all creates a culture and an environment of psychological safety, and it's really important. I think that is incredibly important. People feel safe to make mistakes. They feel empowered and expected to speak up when they're finding things challenging. And I do think you need to create that and have those safe forums in order to be able to know how best to support people, and it won't be a one size fits all.
That well-being call, is that a call that, I mean, I like the idea of that. I remember working with a team of ladies who were rowing around Great Britain, and I helped them devise a check-in once a day where they would literally they do the weather sounds a really good way of doing it, actually. A 1 to 5, 5 they're feeling absolutely great, 1 they're not feeling great, and then they would just literally share why not, basically. And it just gave everybody in the team, wherever he was at. And when you're doing a physical exercise like rowing every day and what they were doing was they needed to know quickly where people are. But I like the idea of the well-being call. I like the idea of referring from a weather point of view. Is that just for your core team in terms of how you do that?
At the moment, I'm doing it with the core assignment team, but we've opened that up, and as I say, we generally work in integrated teams with our clients. So we've opened that up to integrated teams, and we have an approach, a sort of menu of options that you can that we're developing to draw down from. So again and again, it is about understanding, does that work? Is you've got to listen and engage with the team, and I think you've also got to genuinely be willing to change tact. So that works for our team on a monthly basis, and then we'll alternate it with other activities on the other weeks of the month. But I do recognise that might not work in all circumstances and in all teams. So I think it comes back to that listening, trying something new, testing it. Does it work? If it doesn't, change tact. I think that's what it comes back to. It's the culture and the experience and the outcomes that are important, rather than the activity that you're doing itself. So the outcome you're seeking is a supportive culture with camaraderie, where people feel safe to speak up, where people feel psychologically safe to make mistakes or raise challenges. How you get that, there's a range of options, there's a range of different things you can do. It's just about finding the right fit for the community of people that you're working with at that particular time.
And I think fit to work, as you've already alluded to, is creating a psychological safe environment. So for people to be genuinely honest that I'm actually feeling, a rainy day today or whatever it may be, you've got to feel safe psychologically to express that within a team context. How have you found, and it seems that psychological safety, it feels to be a bit of a building block to create an empathetic sort of leadership sort of culture. How have you created or sort of that psychological safety? What are the things that you've done in your team? What you've observed as well? Any examples that would have created that sort of psychological safety?
So what we've done is created forums and spaces to be able to have to facilitate discussions around what's on people's minds, what might be worrying people, what might people feel unsure about, that you there's that age-old thing of no question is a stupid question, but nobody really we've all found ourselves in meetings where we think, oh, I think I want to ask this, but I'm not sure whether I should know the answer. So I think creating the space and framing the discussion as such that there really isn't any there really are no sort of silly questions here. Let's have an open discussion. You can support that by giving people the opportunity to feed questions or topics for discussion in anonymously. So that you are responding to the needs and the asks of the team, but without asking anybody or expecting anybody to kind of stick their head above the parapet, which I know people can feel quite uncomfortable about. I also think if you can, sharing your own experiences, I think there's been a perception, or there was a perception, that as a team leader or a team manager, you've always got to be on your A game, and nothing. You are so razor sharp on focus all the time, and you've got this outer shield that makes you incredibly resilient, and these sort of superhuman superhero managers and leaders. Vulnerability and showing a bit of vulnerability is not is been proven to not be such a damaging thing. I think it makes it's again, it's that proximity to the front line, it's that engagement and being relatable, which then in turn builds relationships, connections, trust, psychological safety. So we ask people what they want to talk and what they want to hear about. We do a range of quite varied sessions that range from facilitating a discussion in a safe environment, and with a topic that isn't going to trigger or exacerbate emotions that would be, demotivating or unhelpful to somebody. We bring in a lot of guest speakers on topics, so we create that kind of learning environment as well to hopefully learn and grow new skills in or educate in areas such as, they've really ranged. So time management through to the importance of sleep, dietitians, that kind of thing. So, and then ask people's feedback. So listen to them, respond to their requests in the way that you can, and then gather feedback on what did you like, what can we do even better, what do you want to see from the future, and continuously evolve and change tact. I think that's the model that I would advocate, that's working for us.
Yeah, and I think you've covered a whole host of things there, because psychological safety is all about creating an environment where people feel A, they can speak up, B, they can challenge the sort of status quo and leadership, but also they can sort of take risks and fail in a safe environment, that it's not okay to fail, but it is okay to fail, if you know what I mean, as long as we learn from those things. And I think one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, you talked about role modeling, about being showing that sort of vulnerability, that every leader's not got this special shield and they get everything right and all the time, is really important. It's probably the most powerful behavioral change agent you have, is to role model. It's the most significant, and there's so many studies on it, and I think people forget. In fact, we're all role modeling right now, and whether it's having a positive impact or a negative impact, it doesn't matter. We are role modeling, period. And so that's important. And so just on the risk and the failure side of things, so in an empathetic culture leadership, how do you deal when things go wrong, when people make catastrophic mistakes, errors? How do you deal with that in that context?
So you got me thinking, because I would prefer that, because people feel supported and are supported, if we are exploring a different way of doing something that may come with risk, it should really, I'd rather focus on the preventative and supporting the thinking and the emerging thinking and how we navigate through that safely. I think if you are a catastrophic mistake is tends to be a little bit too late. And whilst you can recover from that, and I recognize in some disciplines you may have to do that in order to learn and grow and overcome, my preference would be that we've got the right support and cover and guidance and coaching to safely take risks and try new things, where there is an element of awareness and shared understanding of what the risks involved are with that. But let's try and avoid making a catastrophic error. Now, there are situations where I think people can perceive that they have made a catastrophic error, and I've got my own memory of this, where I thought I had made an error, and it was a completely innocent one, but I was worried that I'd put my foot in it on something, essentially. And I spoke to the leader at the time, and he's an empathetic leader, and he said something to me that I have repeated so many times to teams, which is, first of all, don't suffer, don't walk around with the weight on your shoulders of thinking that you've that you've done something wrong. Seek guidance and seek help, because generally you may not be aware of the full context, and you may not have the levers available to you that other people in your organization do to either steer it back on track, help you understand that actually it's not an issue at all. It's just something that you haven't experienced before and you've perceived it as an issue, or prevent it from happening in the first place. And then secondly, what he said was, there's not much in a professional context that we couldn't get through together. I just need to know about it. And it really stuck in my mind because it put me completely back on track for the day, and there really wasn't anything huge to worry about. And it let me know that in the future, it's really unhelpful and unproductive to worry in the workplace. Actually, have a support network around you that you trust and that you can lean on and reach out to. We will always find ourselves, we'll all find ourselves in situations where we feel out of our depth or unsure, or not certain of how to navigate a tricky path. Having that support network around you of trusted, confidants, advisors, coaches, mentors, buddies, and organizations can support to create the structure and the processes that mean that all of those things are in place, can be the difference between a lot of emotion expended and, quite frankly, time wasted on worrying about something, to prevention, or really usually what's quite a simple and straightforward solution. And we are humans, and we are we are known for catastrophic, building things up in our head. I can't get the word out. Catastrophizing things in our own minds, just because we are generally, particularly in I think in the professional context, we can be our own harshest critics.
So, building this culture of empathetic culture and leadership, you touched on, you talked about two things. You talked about the psychological safety, you talked about the support. Is there any other aspects you think that are important if you're a leader right now listening, thinking, okay, build a psychological safe team, create that support, that buddying system, how it sort of transpires in your organization? What else can they do that will help them to be more empathetic as a leader, or create that sort of culture of empatheticness?
So I think the vulnerability bit is probably quite important. So being visible with your team, and building a connection in whatever way you feel is going to resonate. Everybody should know your team better than anyone else does. So knowing what resonates, and what they will be interested in terms of building that connection with you. I think where it can become quite challenging is as you start to scale it up. But as we know, with challenge sort of comes opportunity and new solutions. And I think the role of data becomes really important in that. So I think if your approach, if you were talking about a team of up to 50, an approach when you're looking at an organization thousands will need to be different, so that you can scale that up. That's where I think that focus groups, surveys, data from satisfaction and engagement surveys become really, really important. You can generally draw out from those, right, what are the universal challenges, opportunities, areas of feedback, and then where are those themes or communities of employees that we really want to engage and tap into and understand a little bit more. creating forums for those at an organisation level will then provide that safe space that then hopefully they can then advise leadership what their needs are based on their kind of their grouping. We've done that before and had some really, really positive effects in terms of standing up shadow boards, shadow management committees through change programs to really, really understand from a working level what's on people's minds, what are people most excited about, what are people worried about. I think the most insightful and interesting outcomes of that for me were that it generally wasn't necessarily what we had expected. So it tapped into an insight that could have been a potential blind spot, and that meant that we could put in the activities, the initiatives, interventions, whatever it was, the response, and then demonstrate that we had responded and said, this is what we said, this is what we've done about it, here's the outcome. And again, test through feedback and iterate and evolve. But if we hadn't created those spaces, I'm not sure that we would have been able to glean that rich insight from some of the technical, the tools that you use in a change or transformation program, like change impact assessments, for example. We really did have to tap into the human experience to understand what they were.
And it's interesting you just said those final words that were in my head then is it goes back to that human element, isn't it? And recognizing that people need to feel valued, feel understood, and feel they can contribute and be part of something. And creating those, as you said, those, whether it's feedback forums, focus groups, and an environment that's psychologically safe, with leaders who are, sort of role modeling and sort of showing that vulnerability. It's that human element, and it seems to be that that's the core of all this empathetic leadership, is going back to recognizing that each of us are human, and to work and interact with people in that mindset, and have that intent, I guess, can be really helpful. Just thinking, well, this is another human being just like me, has challenges, has worries, has anxieties, has highs and lows just like I do, and just feeling that sense. I've really enjoyed our conversation, Cady, in terms of and the insights you've shared as well, and your own experience. If people really want to sort of connect and get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Sure, I'd welcome that. So probably on LinkedIn is the best way to do that. So Cady Allen. Yeah, that would be a pleasure.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for today. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.